Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Seisha. I'm the social media manager at Charis Books and More, which is the South's oldest independent bookstore, and also of Charis Circle, which is the nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books. And tonight we are so excited to host Tamara Winfrey-Harris in conversation with Dr. Jenn Jackson for a discussion and celebration of A Black Woman's Guide to Getting Free, an empowering feminist guidance for Black women on living unapologetically and authentically from the best-selling author of The Sisters Are All Right. I'm going to start us off by introducing the Dr. Jackson, is going to be our amazing conversation partner tonight. Jenn M. Jackson is an award-winning professor of political science at Syracuse University and a columnist for Teen Vogue, where they write the popular Speak On It column that explores how today's social and political life is influenced by generations of racial and gender disorder. A queer, gender-flux, androgynous Black woman, Jackson's primary research is in Black politics with a focus on Black feminism, racial trauma and threat, gender and sexuality, and social movements. Give it up for Dr. Jackson in the comments.
Thank you.
And also I'm going to introduce the person of the hour, the amazing Tamara Winfrey-Harris. Tamara is a writer, a speaker, and a dedicated champion for all women and girls. She serves as the president of the Women's Fund of Central Indiana, a special interest fund of the Central Indiana Community Foundation, deans, invests, and advocates so identify as women or girls in Central Indiana have an equitable opportunity to reach their full potential for their place, race, or identity. As a writer, Tamara specializes in the ever-evolving space where current events, politics, and pop culture intersect with race and gender. She says, I tell the stories of Black women and girls to deliver the truth to all those folks who got us twisted, tangled up in racist and sexist lies. My sisters are better than all right. We are amazing. Tamara is the author of the award-winning The Sisters Are All Right, Changing the Broken Narrative of Black Women in America, Dear Black Girl, Letters from Your Sisters on Stepping into Your Power, and of course, A Black Woman's Guide to Getting Free. But before I pass it on to our conversation partner, Dr. Jackson, I'm going to do a few little housekeeping things. I'll come back in at the end. I wanted to remind all of the audience members tonight that they can ask questions, leave comments, comments of adoration and love for our authors tonight. You can say something in the comment section where you can chat, or you can ask a question and it'll appear in the little Q&A box. And they will be a Q&A session at the end, so please ask amazing questions for our authors. And then one more thing is that buying your book from Charis directly supports our work and allows us to keep putting events like these. So if you want to purchase a Black Guide to Get Free, please do so by clicking the button right below us. It'll lead you to our website where you can order it from us. But thank y'all. I'll see you at the end.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to be here. It's long overdue.
To have you here.
And also congratulations, right?
Thank you.
I mean,
Thank
this
you.
is a monumental achievement, so I hope that you are taking some time today to sit with it. This is great. This is beautiful. I want to get started because I want to give folks time to answer and ask questions. And I want to start by thinking about this political moment and the fact that you wrote this book in such a fraught time, right? The idea of having a guide to getting free when we are so repressed, and we are seeing kind of this kind of resurgence of repression all over the globe. I think I want to start with just the concept of freedom and with getting free and what it means in this book and what it means to you.
I mean, one of the things I say in the book that I feel like freedom is very personal. What my freedom feels like may not be what your freedom feels like, but we all have a right to freedom. We all have a right to find our freedom. And as you point out, for a lot of us, for marginalized persons, especially when you have a lot of intersected marginalizations, that can be hard. Because, you know, for a moment, it seemed like in 2020, everyone was having this awakening and things were changing and people's eyes were open. And now we're seeing that may have been momentary. So now what happens? We still have a right to work towards freedom and feeling like we can show up places as our authentic selves. So what does that look like? And I thought it
Yeah.
was, at some point when I started working on this, I had grown tired of pointing out everything that was wrong. I had written a
Mm.
lot about all of the problems that Black women face. And I was at a book event at Indie Reads in Indianapolis. And someone, one of the things I said at the end of Dear Black Girl is, we will get free together.
Yeah.
And one of the women in the audience said, well, how are we supposed to do that? Because of
Yeah.
all the gestures around at all of this, how are we supposed to do that? And this is the answer to that question.
I love that. I love that. So I'm glad you started there, and the idea of like, we can talk about getting free theoretically,
Mhm.
but we need like some answers on actually how to do that.
Mhm.
I feel like you kind of give us a little bit of the archival process of that, the lay of the land at the opening of the book. So I would love for you to share some of that, how you kind of work through. I'll let you tell what happens. I don't want to give no spoilers, but how you work through being in these spaces that are actually meant for us to be free. They're made for us as Black women and femme folk to actually be in community with one another, and to think about and dream about what that freedom might feel like.
So, a lot of this book came to be. I had an opportunity to serve as the very first liberator in residence at
It's
Bennett
lit.
College.
That's
And
so
for those
lit.
of you who don't know about the Bennett Bells, Bennett College is a historically Black women's college in Greensboro, North Carolina. And Suzanne Walsh is the president. She is phenomenal. And she invited me down, and I got a chance to kind of work through some of the practices and some of the ideas that eventually became this book. And one of the things that struck me while I was there was that, so I was sitting on stage in chapel. It was one of their important days where they celebrate their founding. And when you're sitting in you're sitting up, and as someone with a larger body whose knees don't go together,
Mm-hmm.
and I've heard this. I actually heard something about that when I was on stage at my graduation from high school. And so it has
Mm.
become a tape that plays in my head. So
Yeah.
I was on stage in this chapel surrounded by, if you go to Bennett College, it's so juicy. All
Yeah.
of these like Black woman academics and all of these wonderful students. And it was just all of this love in the room. And I was thinking about, is that camera catching what am I need? Like, what am I? And I
Mm.
thought about how, some of the tapes and some of the things that we learn about Black femmehood, Black
Mhm.
womanhood, become things that keep you looking down and focused on correcting what you think is wrong with you or
Mm.
adjusting, as opposed to looking up and taking advantage of all the love and all of the
Mhm.
opportunity that's around you.
Mm.
And I also wanted this book to be a reminder of that.
Yeah. Oof. And it is, right? I remember it's so interesting because as I was reading that in the book, I knew what was coming, right? Because
Mhm,
like we've never talked about that, but I've
mhm,
had similar experiences where,
mhm,
someone policed my body and told me that I wasn't
mhm,
being respectable or ladylike,
mhm,
right? And that
mhm.
the ways that my Black womanhood or girlhood was showing up wasn't in line with these principles that actually were not made for me, right? And so there becomes this time where they don't have to be around anymore, right?
Right.
You start doing
You
that
just do it.
yourself, right? And so I guess I want to hear more from you, and maybe you can share some of the
Mhm.
words of some of the women in the book where they're talking about that, about finding their authentic selves and what it means to kind of have to push back against the ways that they still hear those voices, right? From community members, you know?
I would share, and one of the things I talk about in the book is how so often, yes, we know that, mainstream society, media,
Yeah.
all of those things are going to reinforce those things
Yeah.
because that is baked into our society. But a lot of times we hear it from people who say that they love us and do love us. And
Yeah.
so I'd love to share, this is from one of the first pillar that I talk about is being able to spot the distortions. So to spot all of those biased things that we learn, and their profiles in that chapter from women who talk about the distortions they inherited from their parents. And so This is a profile from a woman named Carolyn, and she said, Mama was really my great-great-grandmother's sister. When I was born, she looked at my biological mother and thought, she can't raise this baby live over here now. My mother died when I was 6 and the arrangement became permanent. Now, Mama was born in 1909, and she was both ahead of her time and a product of her time. She got divorced in the 1930s when folks didn't do that. She worked several jobs to care for her children rather than deal with her husband's shit. She was one of the first women in the nation to get a barber's license. She worked for a company that didn't promote women or Black folks, but they promoted her. She was a trailblazer. Now, Mama told me, a little Black girl growing up in the 1990s, that I could be anything I wanted to be. And she made sure that this was true. When my teacher kept favoring this little light-skinned girl with a swinging ponytail over me, oh, Mama marched up to that school and snapped on everybody for not giving me the same opportunities that they were giving this other child. She fought for me. Mama was also the person who helped teach me that dark skin was bad, and that I, a dark-skinned fat girl with short hair, was not beautiful. She didn't say that, but I got the message. I noticed the way she vigilantly watched my skin in the summertime, calling me in before I could get any darker. And I remember when I wanted to wear a Black dress to the prom, and she said no, because folks wouldn't be able to see me. There were plenty of other comments here and there. I knew the deal. I graduated from one of the most prestigious universities in the country. I have 2 master's degrees. I have a doctorate. And I think my mama still might have believed my greatest accomplishment was giving birth to 2 non-dark-skinned babies. She was alive to meet my eldest. And if you look at my daughter's baby pictures, she's always wearing some big head covering. That's because my mama was trying to help another generation and protect the baby's pretty yellow skin. Mama wasn't being malicious. She wanted the best for me. I know that our society does not value Blackness or dark skin or fatness. America believes women should be beautiful, and it doesn't find any of those things beautiful. Mama wasn't against a woman using her feminine wiles to get ahead, but she was pretty sure that wasn't available to the likes of me. I think she thought, let's try and fight for you in other ways. I need you to be the smartest in the room because you'll never be the prettiest. But here's the thing, as a dark-skinned woman, I don't need to be prepared for colorism. I live it. I struggle to feel beautiful in my skin. Still, even now, when everybody is allegedly all about inclusion and body positivity, I often feel that I should be grateful just to be included in spaces, since no one is checking for dark-skinned people and Black women anyway. This idea of me as automatically less than affects everything I do. Mama thought she was helping, but she made me feel like maybe she believed what society thought about me, that maybe they were right.
So you couldn't hear me. I made sure to mute myself because I was and amen and because child, when I read that the first time, I said, okay, all right. So Tamara done set out to stress us all out with this mess because we all understand this, right?
Yeah.
We all have lived this to some degree, and the ways that it's just so clearly articulated, right? That it's intergenerational, right? And when I read that line, I had to be the smartest because I'll never be the prettiest. It hit me so hard because our little girls are growing up to believe that. So I guess I want to hear from you also, because you start the book off talking about yourself, right? Being a young person who was criticized because your needs weren't together, and that coming back as an adult. And then here we are, we hear Carolyn's story, and it's the same story. So can you talk about why it's so important for us to build these rituals and these practices to help disabuse us of these distortions and of these narratives and stereotypes and messages that we carry with us?
Because I think we need constant reminder. Otherwise, you're just getting constant negativity. you know? Otherwise, you're being hit with all of the, one woman in the book, Lisa Butler, who's fabulous. I don't know if
Mm.
she's on right now, but she's amazing.
Mhm.
Compared it to recognizing poison before it hits your bloodstream.
Mm. Mm.
But I think some of the rituals, some of the practices that we can do, finding spaces that are accepting to us, meditate. I mean, for me, it's meditation, yoga, and breath work. It may be something else for other people, but that's the antidote to all of that poison. And then if you're
Mhm.
not doing those things, if we're not caring for ourselves, which too many of us aren't, because
No,
we're
we're not.
told we're not supposed to, then
That's
all you're
right.
doing is getting hit with poison with no relief.
Whew. So that was the next part of my question, right? Because you frame this as a guide where you're also providing these methods around breath work, around
Mm-hmm.
writing about our authentic selves, about thinking about the practices, for example, our morning rituals, our daytime rituals, what we engage in. When you said we have to decide who we want to be around, and I'm like, okay, well, I feel called out, right? Like this, I guess I'm intrigued, right? Because two questions. First, I've not read a book, right, before that. I don't know what genre this is, right? I don't know. It's a Black feminist genealogy. It's a Black feminist
Something. Yeah.
biomythography. Is Audre
Yeah.
Lorde? Is Bell Hooks? Right? It's in the genealogy, and I want to hear from you about your intentions behind how you chose to create each of these little narratives, each of these chapters, right? But also, I think I want to get from you how you got there, because that's a lot of self work and that's hard work to do, right? To get to the point where
Mm-hmm.
you realize everybody can't be around me, even if they look like me. I want to hear more about that.
A lot of the, well, two things. One thing that inspired this book was my own yoga journey. In 2020, I did a 200-hour yoga teacher training.
Wow.
And in reading, a lot of the foundational scripture and the books that you have to read when you do that, like the Yoga Sutras, there's this idea, Patanjali, who wrote the sutras, that, we are all divine beings that are having this human experience.
Mm.
But the problem is we don't recognize what we really are
Hmm.
because we're distracted by all of this stuff. So we're all of these things that are happening. And it occurred to me that, I mean, that's kind of like being a Black woman.
Child. Kinda.
That's it. That's it. We are divine, but we are distracted by all of these, like all of this input that sees us as anything but.
Yeah.
And so part of our job, part of what we have to do is find a way out of that.
Mm.
And so just like, anyone who is familiar with yoga knows that there are like eight limbs, eight branches that are supposed to be your path to
Hmm.
like yoking, to like figuring out, getting back to who you are. And so,
Yeah.
for the book, I was like, okay, what would be the pillars? What would be the branches? What would be the steps
Hmm.
that I feel like I went through or that other women would need to go through in order to find freedom? And
Hmm.
for me, they are, spotting the distortions, as I mentioned,
Mhm.
learning what your true self is. So, when,
Mhm.
once you know what those distortions are, you've got to find out, okay, who am I when I'm not either outrunning those or trying not to be that or trying to lean into it? Like if
Yeah.
I'm just on my own without that pressure of what Black women should be, what does that look like?
Mm.
And then you have to learn to celebrate yourself,
Yeah.
especially the parts that you are told over and over again are not good. Even the benign, like there's a lot of just
Woo!
benign stuff. Like we are the only people, Black women are the only people I ever hear people saying, well, you're too educated, you're too independent, you're
You
too
think too
accomplished.
much.
Who's going to
Mhm.
want you? You're doing too much.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then you have to know the cost of liberation, because there is a cost, because there's
Yeah,
still many places that are not safe or welcoming for us.
that's right.
And not adjusting to those spaces come with a cost. It just is what it is. I've been on
Yeah.
many college campuses and heard young Gen Zers tell me how they are not going to code switch. They are not going to do any of the things. I'm just
Yeah.
going to show up like I want. And I'm always like, yes, because that wasn't me when I was in college. But I'm
That's
also
right.
like, ooh, but let me talk to you, young sister, because some of the things you say you want are going to be really difficult to get
That's right.
because of that. So you have to
That's right.
understand the cost. You have to develop a practice because, as we were
Yeah.
talking about, you don't get to freedom and just land there. There are seasons to life. There
Yeah.
are 2020 to 24 where the world looks a lot different. And
Yeah.
then lastly, getting to the point where you can see free Black women everywhere.
Yeah.
Because one byproduct of the way we are policed is that we sometimes end up being complicit in policing other Black women and
That's
what
right.
they do. And when you feel free, it's a whole lot easier for you to allow other people to be free as well.
I feel like you're preaching. I'm about to talk on you, Bishop. No, my notes are so unhelpful because they say things like opens with a word, underline, underline. And the chapter on celebrating the real you,
Mm,
really, that pillar really got me, right? Because
mhm.
we are not encouraged to honor ourselves, even when we have done something great, right? The number of times I've been told, you think you all that, you think you better than somebody, your nose is in the air. And I'm like, I'm
As
just,
you are, Dr. Jenn Jackson.
well, but we should be able to be excited
Yes.
when we do a good job, right? We should be able to say, you know what, Dr. Winfrey-Harris, Bishop Winfrey-Harris, you you wrote the hell out that book and you did a great job. And you should be able to go, I sure did, right? And
Yeah.
unfortunately, there is this idea, right, that if Black women in particular say, you know what, I'm proud of myself, right, that's arrogance, that's somehow speaking down about other people. And I really sat with that particular pillar and the story from Nikki, right, because
Yes.
Nikki was saying not only is it about celebrating yourself, it's also about honoring the fact that you have maybe sometimes also endured trauma to get there, right?
Mm-hmm.
That celebrating yourself means the whole of yourself, the stuff
Mm-hmm.
that is not necessarily savory, the things you may not like, but are also really important parts of your story. So I would love to hear you talk about at least, some of Nikki's narrative, but also just how that pillar is so important to maintaining that practice toward freedom.
Yes, and I love Nikki. If you don't know Nikki Meyer, she is fantastic. She is an internationally known yoga teacher. She developed a yoga practice for people with addiction. She is
Yeah,
amazing. So I'm going to
yeah,
give you a little bit of my entry to her profile and then share what she told me. So it's one thing to unearth the woman you are. It is another to love that woman. If Black women are to be free, we must learn to greet ourselves with friendliness, compassion, delight, and equanimity. In yoga, these qualities are called Brahma Viharas, or the four immeasurables. They offer a framework for cultivating positive behaviors and minimizing negative ones. They represent a way to cultivate love and goodwill. Sister, you must cultivate love and goodwill toward your authentic self. And that is true, even and perhaps especially when your identities and experiences resemble some of the negative stereotypes about Black women. You may have endured difficult things. You may have made grievous mistakes. Both of these things are part of the human condition. But society does not offer Black women and girls much grace, so you have to offer yourself grace. As social justice activist Brian Stevenson writes in Just Mercy, each of us is more than the worst thing we have ever done. You are not your trauma or your fuck ups, but they are part of the whole you. And that whole deserves celebration. And so this is what Nikki told me. I used to think that there were parts of myself that I needed to eliminate to be acceptable.
mm,
I've come to learn that the opposite is true. Freedom happens by inclusion rather than exclusion.
yeah,
Freedom is accepting the beauty in your whole self. When I introduce myself, I introduce all of my parts. I'm Nikki. I'm a recovering addict. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I'm a survivor of childhood and adult sexual trauma. I'm a mother. I'm a yoga therapist. I'm a teacher. I'm a grandmother. I'm a great grandmother. I'm a bitch. I'm a former sex worker. All of these identities have been on Team Nikki. How dare I think about excluding them? How dare I make them bad? They've all been part of my survival. Healing and moving toward more freedom and liberation for me has come from including and honoring all those parts, all of them. They are part of my whole. We are a culture that depends on external validation. All our lives, we get this external programming dumped on us, and it changes who we think we are and what we should be. Years and years ago, for instance, I was going through a divorce. It was so hard, but I came to realize that the pain I was feeling was not because I thought my husband and I should stay together, but because I was very attached to a vision of who I should be. I needed to be a wife. We become attached to those ideas and images of what our existence should look like. But the wholeness is still there. One of my teachers, Gary Kraft, says, examining our conditioning is our ticket to freedom. Strip away the external conditioning and you find wholeness. We have to have an unshakable personal belief that we are complete. We learn to celebrate our whole selves by pausing and consciously withdrawing from doing to focus on reconnecting with self. Our culture programs us to do, and we lose track of our personal understanding of what it means to be right. We learn to celebrate our whole selves in community. There's a little tribe of women in my life. I give these women spiritual consent. They give me spiritual consent. It's a trusted, rooted relationship. They call me in, they called me back to true self. We learn to celebrate our whole selves by seeing the completeness in younger generations, little Black girls, babies. You know, when we're born, there is no black or white, no boy or girl, no concepts like that. There is nothing to seek or look for or run after. It's already there. We are simply divine. There's a picture of me holding one of my great-granddaughters when she was just 2 hours old. I show it all the time when I'm teaching. It is a touchstone. I am looking at my newest descendant and I am thinking, this is wholeness.
It's just so good. I just, Black women will always be the goats. You know what I'm saying? Like, yes. It's just so good. Like, it's just so good. Like, I think it provides this kind of empirical evidence of the ways that's saying, you know, you have to leave your identities at the door, how violent that is, right? And how for so many of us, that has always been a site of rupture, right? You know, if you go to work, you got to only be parts of yourself. You go to church, you got to be parts of yourself. In this relationship, you can be parts of yourself. And I love that this book is about reintegration, right? It's about all those parts you've been leaving everywhere, right? All those parts you've been leaving at doors. Go back, right? Very Sankofa, go back and
get it. Exactly.
Go back and fetch them.
Yes.
So I love that so much. And I want to move now toward the end of the book, where you start talking about a practice of freedom. Again, my notes just say this is a good word on page 106. You know, I think what's also really beautiful about the way you wrote this book is that you're very intentional about centering so many stories from folks who are disabled, folks who are queer, trans, folks who are fat, folks who are femme, folks who are, you know, you're like, listen, Black women come in all versions and shapes and sizes and creeds, and all of us are still dealing with this same shit, right? And so I think I want to just talk about, as we close out, because I want to also encourage folks to leave questions, so we have some time for that. If you could share some of this practice, like the practical nature of freedom. You bring in Zora into the book. You bring in Nina Simone into the book. You bring in so many folks who are thinking about freedom. And I think what stood out to me was when you said flatly, freedom is a practice, right?
Mhm.
And I just want to hear from you about that practice.
So some of the things I talk about doing in the book, and you were talking about the idea of being mindful of who you're around and what you consume.
Mm-hmm.
Because I said so much of, I started writing talking a lot about popular culture and how it intersected with some of these ideas, because popular culture is super powerful. And so, one of the practices I suggest women do is try, maybe just during the length of time you're reading this book or for a month, what if you did not consume any negative media and things about Black women? Now, that's hard to do, but just being intentional and witnessing and listening to the words. I love me some hip hop. Some
Yeah.
might say the more ratchet, the better.
Yeah.
But
There's some
sometimes,
landmines in there. Yeah.
sometimes,
Yeah.
we are one of few groups of people that are asked to be entertained by our own oppression.
That's right.
So, listen to what you're hearing, and maybe you shouldn't listen. Just what happens if you don't listen to that?
Yeah.
What happens if you don't step onto Twitter and look at all those clips from incel podcasts that just make you mad?
Yeah.
Because they're not just making their mad, they're getting in your head.
That's right.
What if you made time, on a regular basis to just sit in silence and listen to yourself?
Mm.
Without all of the input? What if you decided to treat your body well, not because you want it to look different, but because you think it's worthy of being, because you value it and you just want to give it good food and maybe
Yeah.
move it around a little bit?
Yeah. You
What if
deserve it.
you did those things? What if you said no?
Yeah.
What about that? What if you said no? So what if you focused on some of those practices? And another thing I think is, identifying what gives you joy and what gives you nourishment. Because sometimes it's not taking things away. It's like what you're adding to your life.
That's right.
If it's, I just like fresh flowers, and so I need to go to Kroger and put some on my desk.
Yeah.
What if it's, small things? What if it's, I just shut myself in the bathroom for 5 minutes because I got a whole bunch of people in my house and I need some silence? It's just prioritizing what feeds you.
Yeah.
But what if we did that and we made that a practice? Because that's the way, when you feel yourself getting away from freedom, those things will pull you back and pull you back to your center.
I love that. I love that. I love that. I love that. I know you also wanted to share the epilogue. So I'm gonna let you do that. And then I want to talk about your kind of what's coming next.
Yes. So this is the epilogue. And the quote I used to open this chapter is a quote from In Vogue. Free your mind and the rest will follow. Sisters, your freedom can begin in no other place than inside you. Feminist scholar Bell Hooks wrote, if any woman feels she needs anything beyond herself to legitimate and validate her existence, she is already giving away her power to be self-defining, her agency. Bell is right, as she was on so many things. No one has more capacity to truly see you than you. Other people may render you a caricature. You must always know the fully drawn, real woman behind the distortion. You wear the mask that grins and lies to protect your identity. You must always know the real face underneath the disguise. Because when you can recognize the conqueror's poison before you sip it, when you know who you are, absent the hum of misogynoir, when you love who you are, even the hard parts, when you are clear about what parts of yourself you can afford to gamble with and which you cannot, when you have made a commitment to choose yourself and your well-being again and again, then you will be free. And when you can see me, sister, in all my all rightness, then we will be free together. And that's the answer to that question.
I love this. I love this. Okay, so I have one last question.
Okay.
Okay. So what I want to ask before we turn to questions, please y'all drop questions in the chat.
Mhm.
What I want to ask is, in this moment with
Mhm.
this book, what do you want for us? What do you want for Black women? What do you want for your readers? What are you hoping will happen when folks pick this book up, when they download this book, when they listen to this book? What is your hope for all of us?
So, one of the things when I started getting into yoga practice, there was this Sanskrit prayer that one of my favorite teachers always said at the end of class that stuck out to me so much that it's tattooed on my arm over here.
Wow.
It's Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu, and it means may all beings be happy, healthy, safe, and free.
Mm,
That is what I wish for all people, including Black women. And I want us to know that we deserve that.
mm,
I want us to know that we can get it. And it may not last always, but we should always be striving for it. And I want other people to understand that we deserve it and
mm,
support us in getting it.
mm. A
We don't
word.
exist. We are not, in fact, the mules of the world.
We are not.
Uh, Trademark Zora Neale Hurston.
Child.
We deserve
Mhm.
happiness, healthiness, safety, and freedom.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I really do feel like this book will help us to do that. I think that there's this kind of idea that the practical, logistical, routinized work of getting free is separate from the work of loving oneself, the work of
Mm-hmm.
the inner work. And I love that you bring the two together, the exteriority and the interiority, to say, oh no, it's about our whole selves. It's about our all of us has to get free. This can't be a piecemeal process.
Yes. And, so often, um, we're tapped to solve everybody else's problems.
That's right.
We're on the vanguard of everything.
Yeah.
And so we're working so much for our families and our communities and the job and the church and the sorority and like all the things that we
Mhm.
forget that all of the things we're trying to do. It's what Brie Rivera says in the book.
Yeah.
She talks about forgetting that what I'm working for other people is for me. It's for me
That's right.
too.
That's
So
right.
we have to remember that all that health, happiness, all, safety, all of those things we are working for other people, it's for us. And
That's
we
right.
can't forget that.
That's right. That's right. Okay, I don't want to take up all the time because I plan to talk to you about this indefinitely.
Yeah.
But I do want folks to, if folks have questions, please drop them. I see a lot of everyone saying yes.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Tamara. We are very proud of you. And I want folks to drop their questions in the chat because we've got a few minutes left, and I wanted to save some time so that in case folks wanted to ask questions about the pillars, ask questions about your practice, your yoga work, and your dedication to Black women and girls and femmes, what that looks like. So please, y'all, drop your questions in the chat. I still have one more question or two. So while we wait for that,
Uh-huh.
I will go ahead and ask because I think, okay, there's one. Okay. I'll ask after this. So Asha asked, what did you learn about yourself in writing this book?
Ooh, Asha. So, so just like Bree said, the good things that we want for other women, they're
Mm,
for us too. I also learned that it doesn't matter how many books I've written about this, I am still susceptible to
mhm,
all of those same pressures as
mhm,
well. It is hard to outrun. That is why, part of that is why I ended up talking about the practice of freedom, because I
mhm,
realized I needed to practice it myself. And I
mm,
talk about in the book, like, this is probably the hardest book that I've ever written, just
mm,
because of where I am in life and career and all of those things. I'm caretaking a husband with early onset dementia.
mhm.
I took on a new job that I absolutely love, doing something I'm passionate about, but it means leading an organization, and that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And then I decided I was going to write a book in addition.
Why
And
not?
so I realized that there were many times when I was doing exactly, I was right. And you need to take care of yourself when I hadn't done,
You're like, ooh.
when I was like, not so much. And so it was a reminder, one, that I need reminders, and
Mm,
also another reminder of how achievement
yeah,
can really get us as
yeah,
women.
yeah.
I, I started interviewing women back during lockdown, during the height of the pandemic, because I saw this thing where the women I knew that were most burnt out were the Black women that you would think, I mean, they had educational privilege, they had job privilege, they had some of the things that we're always told, if you get those things, it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be easier. But
Yeah,
they were running themselves ragged
yeah,
and extra stressed out. And a lot of them said, it's when I achieve things since I was a child, that's when I'm seen.
yeah,
And so I don't know how to not do that, because
yeah,
I learned that when you get good grades and when you're the first and you're the this, then I get recognition. And so it was
yeah.
a reminder that not to get caught up in doing, not to kill myself trying to do and achieve things.
Oof.
Yeah.
That's try. That's the listen. Next book you got to write about love. I would love for you to do that. I need help.
Ooh.
But I need some assistance. So I did have a question about that. And I think this actually dovetails really nicely with my question, which was, you have such a diverse collection of voices, and this is something that's a hallmark of your writing. Is like you are in community with Black women. You don't write, to Black women. You're writing with us, right?
Mhm.
And so I want to know if there were any surprises that you heard in these conversations. Anything that stuck out to you, that a sentiment where you were like, "Oh my gosh, I hadn't thought of that before. That hadn't occurred to me."
I am constantly surprised at how vulnerable Black women are willing to be with me. And I think sometimes it's because nobody ever says, "How are you doing?" And if
Yeah,
if you ask us, we're going to tell you. And
yeah.
so it wasn't necessarily like a thing that I heard that surprised me. It was just, I am always surprised at how open we are willing to be. And
Mm,
so, yes, I know in general that we should love all parts of ourselves, but the way Nikki said it and was willing to say, I am an addict, I am
yeah,
an alcoholic, I'm all of these things, and to say that is powerful,
I
because
agree.
most people won't say that,
I agree. I agree.
especially
Especially,
when they have an international brand and everyone thinks that they're amazing. Why should I
right,
tell you about any struggle or vulnerability that I have? I can
that's
erase all of that, but she
that's
doesn't.
wow. And I was also thinking as you were saying that, especially when we are punished more harshly for our
Yes.
vulnerability, right? I mean, you touch on vulnerability in the book as well, about how for us it's always been a site, kind of fraught site for us.
Hmm.
Vulnerability is kind of scary for us. So I think that's
Hmm.
also really beautiful. I would love to take a few more questions, maybe one or two more questions. But as we wait for those questions, I do have. Okay, this is my last one. This is my last one. So we talked about what motivated the book. I want to get into. I don't like to ask a lot of writing questions. I like to hear how you're thinking about the book and what it did to change you and how you feel. But I do want to ask at least one writing, formal question, and just thinking about your process, right? Because
Hmm.
I know as a qualitative interviewer how intense these interviews and conversations can be. I had to learn how to compartmentalize a lot when talking to young people, because I'm just like, their stories for me would be very emotional. And you have some rich data and information here as a political scientist. I'm like, whoa, like, I want to hear from you about just the process of collecting these conversations and being in conversation with so many women who are sharing these intimate details of their lives, their childhoods, as you said, things that,
Hmm.
having national brands and having these positions that are typically not rewarded for being honest in public. How did you manage that as a writer and a researcher?
So it's always hard. I always start with interviews because I do want my books to be reflective of the Black women's experiences. And I know I can't represent every Black woman. So I always start with interviews. And I used to, on my first book, The Sisters Are All Right, like my background was trained in journalism. So in my head, I was like, you are supposed to be dispassionate. Listen to these stories. It's just the facts. But you know what? I am not a journalist. That's not what I do anymore. I'm not an academic. And I can't help, you get in these interviews and you want to say, yes, me too, girl. Yes, I know. It's like they end up being more conversations than just interviews. But I do make sure that I record and I get transcripts, because I also want to make sure that I am not telling their stories filtered through my lens, but I'm actually capturing their intention.
That's right.
And then, accountability is important. It helps me move forward. And I have, I think, written all of my books early in the morning.
Yeah.
Disha Filia, I don't know if she's here or not, is my writing buddy.
We love Disha, okay?
On with her at 6 o'clock in the morning on Zoom.
Okay?
Yes, on Zoom, typing away, and she was typing away, and with some breaks for shenanigans. But I did it first thing in the day because I wanted it to get done, and it was important to me, which is another part of freedom, is carving out time to do what is important to, like, our dreams and our desires should not be secondary.
That's right. Oh my gosh, child. Yep. Okay. All right. We have another question, which I think is a great question. Now that book 3 is written and done, are you planning to start a yoga practice for Black women?
Oh my gosh. I would love to if I had time to regularly teach a class. But what I've done, though, I mean, when I went to Bennett, I had which incorporates yoga for their students, who does that? Bennett College does.
Yeah.
I was able to teach a class for them, and I've incorporated, yoga into several other workshops and things I do with Black women. I see Dr. River Sturdivant on here, and she and I have done some things where we mix kind of talking about breath work and meditation and self-actualization and emotional intelligence and yoga, and pulling those things together. So I do, it's just here and there, not regularly.
I love that. Well, here we have a question also from River. Being on this side of the writing and publishing process, is there anything that you wish you had included, but it did not make it into the book?
I mean, I always say one day I just need to take all of the interviews I've done with Black women, because some of these interviews, I mean, were more than an hour long, especially with all the conversation and the hee-hees and the girl. And I condensed them down to 500 words.
Impressive.
And people were dropping, like some people, I was like, doggone it. Like, people were dropping gems. So maybe one day there's a wisdom from Black women book.
I love this. Yeah, like
the deep cuts
to the soul, but with Black women.
Yes.
I'm all for it. I'm all for it. I would like to take any other questions that folks have. And I now that you said that you got all these interviews, somebody said make a documentary. I'm also wondering if you have does that mean we have another book? What's next?
So here's the thing. I shouldn't be saying this out loud, but I'm going to. I would like to try fiction. It's outside of my comfort zone.
Do it.
I've always wanted to write some genre fiction. So I want to try it.
I'm sitting over here all excited, like I'm your agent. I don't know. I don't know why I'm not getting paid, but I'm like, I'll read it. I mean, I've read all of them.
I shouldn't say this idea. Somebody's going to do it. I would like to retell. Have you read the yellow wallpaper short story?
I haven't.
Anyone, if you ever take a class on feminism, Charlotte Perkins Gilman. So it was a short story, white woman, early 1900s, late 1800s, who is slowly driven crazy by the pressures on her, to be submissive, to stay in the house, to relax. And I've always wondered what that story would look like with a Black woman at the center of it.
I think this
Because
is your
it's
next
all
book.
about the angel in the house, the pedestal, and that pressure that was put on white women at the time, and how it was slowly crazy making. But what do those pressures look like for Black women?
Yes.
So someday.
Everyone's saying yes.
He said they
Yes.
love that idea. All right,
Yes.
awesome. Also,
think
can I
it's
say
great.
one thing?
Yes.
By Black Women Taught Us, that's back there behind Dr. Jenn Jackson. Because yes, Black women, we are awesome in the blueprint, and we teach things.
We do. We teach
We
almost
do.
everything ever in the history of ever. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's astounding how people don't know that. So
Yeah.
where can people find you? I know that you are now going to be out in the world talking about your wonderful new book. I'm assuming we have tour dates. So tell us about that.
You can see my tour dates. I keep my website updated, kind of, at tamarawinfreyharris.com. But
Lovely.
this week, I will be at the 2024 Midwest Writers Conference. So if you were
Hey.
in the Midwest, come by. And it's at Ball State University, but they also have a virtual package. So if any writers are listening, it's not too late to join
Lovely.
that. And on Saturday, I will be at Source Booksellers.
Oh, I love
Detroit.
Source.
Yeah, right. At
I love them.
7:30, and I'll be in conversation with Rochelle Riley. And so
Wonderful.
come and see me there, Detroiters. If you're in
Absolutely.
the D,
In the D, is that what they call it? In the D?
yes,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. I don't know nothing about Detroit. I'm from California. Okay, someone wants to join your writing accountability group. I feel like it's a one-on-one thing. I think do you have but you do have the women's writing workspace, right? Did you have that
So
space?
so if you go on Facebook, Ebony Chappelle and I started the Black Women's Writing Society about 6 years ago in Indianapolis. We have been meeting in person. It started at the Central Library. We moved to the Ojama bookstore. We have been quiet, kind of dormant this year, but we're going to bring it back. So if you look for Black Women's Writing Society on Facebook,
Yes.
you can watch us, and we will be back. And it's
That's lovely.
space once a month for Black women just to get together and write.
I've definitely I've joined. I think when you first started,
Mm-hmm.
it was critical in helping me finish this book. So it's a lovely space. So if y'all can find them,
Yeah.
absolutely join. So I want to bring back the folks from Charis, who I think there's some announcements that we need to have in the space. But I'm just so grateful for your work and your wisdom and your care for us. So I hope that at least in some small way, you are receiving your flowers because you deserve them. I hope you understand.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for being in conversation with me. You know, when Black Women Taught Us came out, not that I didn't know you before, because I did, but I was like, oh, I wonder if I could get Dr. Jenn Jackson.
Of course. I'll do anything for you. I think you are incredible. So just ask me and I'll be there.
And I did it. So I am fangirling.
So grateful for you. Okay, we're going to stop chit-chatting. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Go ahead. You got official stuff. Go ahead.
I don't have anything official, but I just want to give you both your flowers. Thank you so much for this incredible discussion tonight. Also, thank you to the audience. Y'all were so active, asking great questions. But give it up one more time for our incredible discussion tonight and for these incredible authors. If you haven't already bought A Black Woman's Guide to Getting Free, make sure to purchase it from Charis Books using that link in the teal button right below us to keep supporting our work and helping us keep putting on more events so that we can bring you back, Tamara, when you write that the yellow wallpaper rewrite. That sounds cool. I'm very excited for that. So please make that happen.
We'd love it.
But yeah, we are going to finish up. Thank you again to our audience. Thank you again to our incredible conversation. But yeah, everyone stay safe. Have a great night.
Thank y'all. Thank you for being here. And thank you for your work. And let's do this again.